Shortly after the hospital ship arrives in San Francisco, Winch, the top sergeant, much like those from his first two novels, goes on liberty and gets drunk, walking through an area where, quote, all the old duffers were on their soapboxes, droning out their worn-out, ancient, old-fashioned political speeches. Winch gives one of them a $5 bill to borrow the soapbox. Soldiers of the world, unite, he says. You have nothing to lose but your guns. A crowd of amused servicemen formed fairly quickly. At first, they were laughing and cheering him on, but some began to get disturbed as he went on. Hey, you, he singled out a private. What are you making a month? $38, right? What do you think you'd be making if we were organized, huh? No, don't laugh. Think about it. Well, what couldn't we do if we were organized? Every country needs us, right? Everyone has unions. Why not us? Jap soldiers, German soldiers, English soldiers, U.S. soldiers, Russians, French, Australians, all united. We'd corner the market. Hell, we could make explosive charges out of mortar. We could take the explosive charges out of mortar shells and artillery. Put white flour in them instead. How would that be? A couple of derogatory whistles came from the back of the crowd. You don't like that? Why not? No more casualties. Welch bellowed in his command voice. You simply walk to the rear. We could have arbitration committees decide where the battles would be held. He spread his arms. No more jungles, right? Who'd pick a jungle to fight in? A madman speaking, perhaps, but a soldier trying to make sense out of the combat experience in a war he knows will soon be over, had been over for 30 years when Jones wrote the book, and the warring countries friendly again and the soldiers left to fend for themselves. He says he's more like a German or a Jap first sergeant than he is like a civilian, which is the problem seen in each of the men coming back with him. 4 of the old company go to a Tennessee hospital after being evacuated from New Georgia. All have that peculiar numbness of soul that combat caused in everybody. Only Winch, the first sergeant, isn't wounded. He has fever, high blood pressure, and congestive heart failure. He quits his hard drinking, but he still has his men to take care of in spite of his condition. Prell, evolved from Pruitt and Witt in the first 2 novels, had been awarded the Medal of Honor and had taken 50 caliber machine gun bullets in his thighs and is fighting to save his leg. Strange had an injured hand. Landers had a smashed ankle. All are faced with the problem of adjusting to a new life where the enemy is now a changed society, torn apart by war but benefiting by good economic times. And there are no indoctrination centers to help these men assimilate into society as they were when they entered the Army and began preparing for the evolution of the soldier. I think that's changed to a certain extent now, but we don't know what's going to happen 30, 40, 50 years from now, after the Iraqi veterans have lived their life in Afghanistan. Jones shows the agonies and frustrations each of these men has as he copes with his own pain and depression from his combat experience and the wounds and shocks of the world around him. Before losing his sanity and ending up in the hospital prison ward, Winch does what he can for each of them, even though they all hate him and he knows it. None of the others make it either. Strange finds his wife in love with an officer who did strange things to her sexually that Strange had never done, that he found perverted. Taking the $7,000 he and his wife were going to use to open a restaurant after the war, he throws it into away on a hospital suite in the Peabody Hotel in Memphis. Booze and women for his old company. On his way to Europe after being returned to duty, he commits suicide by jumping over the ship. And that's what happened to my cousin years afterwards. Maybe I mentioned earlier on June the 6th, the day he had landed on Omaha Beach, he put a shotgun in his mouth and blew his head off. Landers gets the discharge he thinks he wants. With that in his hands, he walks into the path of an oncoming car rather than face civilian life. Prell conquers his last battle when a soldier cracks him in the head with the big end of a pool cue. Not a very pretty picture of how war and warfare affects the fighting man, but Jones painted a realistic picture that is crystal clear. James Jones himself gained fame and notoriety for his war-era novels, and with the climate being what it is, there's a resurgence of interest in what he has to say about the effects of war. He was a regular enlisted infantryman from Middle America who was able to articulate a lot in the fears, frustrations, and heroism common to combat soldiers and a great many other American servicemen and women. He was one who looked backwards for a long time and left much to ponder about regarding war and warfare. As one D-Day veteran from near Jones's hometown once told me, that old boy knows what he's talking about. You can tell that he's been there. So the military then does a thorough job of making its warriors and getting them to do what is asked of them, but it does very little to unmake them when the war is over. As Jones showed it, these people are changed forever. None of them would actually ever really get over it, he wrote. That's true of Jones's World War II veterans. It's true of Crane's Civil War veterans, and it's true of the veterans from other wars through the years, and will be and is true of the war in Afghanistan, Iraq, and other places today. But I think James Jones's real legacy, because by this time he had evolved as not only as a soldier and started the process of de-evolution, but also started completed the process or the evolution of the writer. I think his real legacy, it seems to me, is to make us realize the true price paid by those who were sent to do our fighting in our wars. He did so with brutal honesty and great respect and empathy for the ordinary soldier. There was a man who called me the other day who read Some Came Running on his way to Vietnam. I don't know whether he's here yet or not, but he said he is here, right back there. He read Some Came Running on the way to Vietnam and has been a Jones fan for 40-some years. Thank you for coming, sir. That's the conclusion of what I have to say here. Thank you.